My nephew destroyed my wedding photos out of jealousy, so I ruined his graduation. I was standing in the principal's office at Riverside High School, holding a manila envelope that weighed maybe 8 ounces, but felt like it contained a nuclear bomb, when Principal Donald Reichert asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Mr. Donovan, are you absolutely certain you want to do this? Once we proceed, there's no taking it back." My hands were shaking so badly the envelope rattled. Through the window, I could see the football field where they'd set up chairs for the graduation ceremony in 3 hours. 500 white folding chairs arranged in perfect rows, a stage with a podium draped in school colors, families already arriving early to claim the best spots. Somewhere in that crowd would be my nephew Cameron, 17 years old, valedictorian, full scholarship to Stanford, golden boy who could do no wrong. He'd be wearing his cap and gown, probably taking selfies with friends, completely unaware that I was about to destroy him the same way he'd destroyed me 6 months ago. I looked Principal Reichert in the eye and said, "I'm certain. Show everyone what he really is." I'd been married to Lisa for exactly 9 days when I first noticed something was wrong with our wedding album. We'd just gotten back from our honeymoon in Costa Rica, exhausted but happy, and I'd picked up the professionally bound album from the photographer's studio on my way home from work. The photographer, a woman named Andrea Mills, who'd been shooting weddings for 15 years, had done an incredible job. 300 photos documenting every moment of our day, from Lisa getting ready with her bridesmaids, to our first dance, to the sparkler exit at the end of the night. The album had cost us $2,800, but it was worth every penny. These weren't just photos. They were the only visual record of the best day of our lives. My parents had flown in from Seattle. Lisa's grandmother, 93 years old and fighting stage 4 cancer, had made the trip from Phoenix against her doctor's advice because she refused to miss her favorite granddaughter's wedding. It turned out to be Grandma Ruth's last major outing. She passed away 2 weeks after our wedding, and those photos were the last pictures we'd ever have of her. I'd left the album on our dining room table that first night back, planning to look through it with Lisa over dinner. But I got called into an emergency work meeting, one of those crisis situations where a client's entire network had crashed and they needed all hands on deck immediately. I'm a systems administrator for a mid-sized tech company, and when infrastructure fails, I'm one of the people who gets the 2 a.m. phone calls. I texted Lisa that I'd be late, grabbed my laptop bag, and headed out. I didn't get home until past midnight. Lisa was already asleep. The wedding album was still on the dining room table, and I was too exhausted to look at it. I just collapsed into bed. The next morning, I had to leave early for a follow-up meeting with the client. Lisa had an early shift at the hospital where she worked as an ER nurse. We were like ships passing in the night those first couple weeks back from the honeymoon, both of us swamped with work and trying to settle into married life. The album sat on that dining room table for 3 days before I finally had a free evening to sit down and go through it properly. That's when I saw them. The scratches. Deep, deliberate gouges carved into the surface of the photos, completely destroying faces, ruining entire images. My stomach dropped. I started flipping through pages faster, my hands shaking. Page after page of vandalism. Lisa's face scratched out in our engagement photos at the beginning of the album. My face obliterated in the getting ready shots. Both of us defaced in the ceremony photos. Our expressions turned into grotesque scratches and tears in the expensive photo paper. The photos of Grandma Ruth were the worst. Someone had taken what looked like a knife or scissors and carefully, methodically destroyed her face in every single picture. Those irreplaceable images of a dying woman at her granddaughter's wedding, mutilated beyond recognition. Out of 300 photos in that album, 138 were destroyed. Not random damage, not accidental. This was targeted, intentional, vicious. Someone had spent considerable time carefully defacing specific people in specific photos. I felt like I was going to throw up. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. Lisa came home 20 minutes later and found me sitting at the dining room table, the ruined album open in front of me, tears running down my face. I'm not someone who cries easily. I'm 32 years old, former college athlete, generally pretty stoic, but seeing those photos destroyed, especially the ones of Grandma Ruth, broke something in me. Lisa's scream when she saw the damage brought our neighbor running over to check if we were okay. We spent the next 2 hours going through every page, documenting the destruction, trying to understand what had happened. The album had been in our possession for 3 days. During that time, we'd both been at work most of the time, and the apartment had been locked. We had a security system that showed no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no kicked-in doors, nothing stolen except our irreplaceable memories. The only people who had keys to our apartment were Lisa's parents and my brother Keith, who I'd given an emergency key to when we first moved in 2 years ago. I called the photographer first thing the next morning. Andrea was horrified when I described the damage. "I have the digital files backed up," she said immediately. "We can reprint everything. It won't be cheap, probably another $1,500 for a new album, but we can replace the physical prints." I felt a wave of relief so intense I actually got lightheaded. The photos weren't completely lost. We could rebuild the album. But Andrea's next words made my blood run cold. "The thing is, Mr. Donovan, I need you to understand something. Those albums are treated with a protective coating. You can't accidentally scratch them. Whatever did this damage required significant force and deliberate effort. Someone wanted to destroy those photos. This was intentional vandalism. I already knew that, but hearing her confirm it made it real in a different way. This wasn't some freak accident. Someone had broken into our home or used their access to deliberately destroy our wedding memories. The police report was filed by Officer Dennis Huang, a 15-year veteran of the Municipal Police Department who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He took photos of the damaged album, documented our statements, checked our security system logs. No signs of forced entry, he confirmed, which means whoever did this either picked your locks, which is possible but unlikely in a building with this kind of security, or they had a key. He looked at us seriously. Do you have any enemies? Anyone who might have a grudge against you or your wife? Ex-partners? Disgruntled co-workers? Anyone with a reason to do something like this? Lisa and I looked at each other. We were both pretty boring people. Good jobs, stable lives, no drama. I didn't have any exes who'd be vindictive enough to break into my apartment and destroy wedding photos. Lisa had dated one guy seriously before me, but he'd moved to Australia 3 years ago and seemed genuinely happy for her when she got engaged. We gave Officer Huang the names of the 3 people with keys to our apartment: Lisa's parents, Tom and Nancy Sullivan, and my brother Keith. Keith had seemed like the obvious person to call when I needed an emergency contact with building access. He lived 10 minutes away, he was responsible, and we'd always been close. He was 35, 3 years older than me, worked as a financial advisor, had a stable life. He also had a son, Cameron, from his first marriage. Keith had gotten divorced when Cameron was 8, a messy split that ended with Keith's ex-wife Rachel moving to Oregon with her new boyfriend and leaving Cameron with Keith full-time. Keith had remarried 2 years ago to a woman named Jennifer, but Cameron had never adjusted well to having a stepmother. He was a difficult kid, brilliant but troubled, the kind of teenager who was valedictorian of his class, but also had a reputation for being cold, manipulative, entitled. I'd noticed over the years that Cameron had a jealousy problem. If someone else succeeded, got attention, achieved something, Cameron took it as a personal attack. When his best friend got accepted to Yale, Cameron spent months trash-talking Yale to anyone who'd listen. When his stepsister won a regional art competition, Cameron started a rumor at school that she'd plagiarized her submission. But destroying my wedding photos? That seemed extreme even for Cameron. I called Keith the day after we discovered the damage, asked him to come over so we could talk. He arrived looking concerned, bringing Jennifer and Cameron with him. Cameron was 17, tall and lanky, with dark hair and his father's sharp features. He had this way of looking at you like he was analyzing your weaknesses, cataloging them for future use. "What's going on?" Keith asked when he saw my face. I showed them the album. I watched their reactions carefully. Keith looked genuinely shocked and horrified. Jennifer gasped and covered her mouth. But Cameron's expression was harder to read. There was surprise there, yes, but underneath it was something else. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. It was subtle, just a flicker in his eyes, but I saw it. I'd spent enough time around Cameron over the years to recognize his tells. He was pleased about this. I couldn't prove it yet, but I knew. Officer Huang came by that evening to interview everyone with apartment access. Lisa's parents had solid alibis for the entire time period when the damage could have occurred. They'd been at a medical conference in Chicago, had hotel receipts, plane tickets, dozens of witnesses. Keith had alibis too. He'd been at work during business hours, had client meetings documented in his calendar, security footage showing him entering and leaving his office building. Jennifer had been at her part-time job at a dental office, also well documented. But Cameron had large blocks of unaccounted time. He was a high school senior with a light class schedule, often finished school by 1 p.m., had no job, spent most afternoons supposedly studying at home or the library. When Officer Huang asked where he'd been on the specific day the album had been delivered to our apartment, Cameron said he'd been home alone studying. No witnesses, no proof, just his word. Huang asked if he could look at Cameron's phone, check location data. Cameron refused, said his lawyer, a family friend Keith kept on retainer for business matters, had advised him not to provide any information without a warrant. That refusal told me everything I needed to know. Innocent people generally cooperate with police when asked simple questions. Guilty people lawyer up. I started investigating on my own. I checked our building security footage, the cameras in the lobby and parking garage. On the afternoon of the day I'd picked up the wedding album, the footage showed Cameron entering our building at 2:35 p.m. He was carrying a backpack. He went up to our floor, was out of camera range for 38 minutes, then came back down at 3:13 p.m. When he left, his backpack looked flatter, less full. I pulled the footage and saved it to 3 different backup locations. This was evidence. Not quite enough to prove anything definitively. He could claim he'd been visiting for innocent reasons, but combined with everything else, it was damning. I showed the footage to Officer Huang. He watched it twice, made notes, but his expression was skeptical. It's circumstantial. He could say he came to drop something off, to visit. Any number of innocent explanations. Unless we can prove he actually damaged the photos, there's nothing actionable here. I needed more proof. I went to Andrea, the photographer, and asked if she could analyze the damage forensically, determine what kind of tool had been used. She referred me to a document examiner named Dr. Patricia Greenwood, who had a PhD in forensic science and 23 years of experience testifying as an expert witness in criminal cases. Dr. Greenwood examined the damaged album under magnification, took detailed photographs, analyzed the scratch patterns. Her report was 8 pages long and concluded that the damage had been caused by a precision cutting tool, likely an X-Acto knife or similar craft blade. The scratches showed consistent pressure and angle, indicating they'd been made by someone with a steady hand and deliberate intent. Furthermore, she found microscopic fibers embedded in some of the scratches, synthetic fibers consistent with the kind used in backpack materials. She couldn't definitively match them to Cameron's backpack without having the actual backpack to compare, but the finding was suggestive. I paid her $800 for the analysis and added her report to my growing file of evidence. Meanwhile, the damage to our marriage memories was just the beginning of Cameron's campaign against me. 2 weeks after the photo incident, I got called into a meeting with my company's HR director, a woman named Yolanda Barnes, who'd been with the company for 11 years. She looked uncomfortable as she pulled up her computer screen. "Ryan, we received an anonymous email alleging that you've been viewing inappropriate content on company computers and harassing female co-workers. I need to ask you some questions." My blood ran cold. The allegations were completely false. I'd never harassed anyone, never viewed anything inappropriate at work. But I had to sit through a 2-hour interrogation while HR went through my computer history, my email records, my chat logs. They interviewed every woman I worked with. All of them said I'd been nothing but professional. The investigation cleared me completely, but the damage was done. Rumors spread through the office. People looked at me differently. My boss started excluding me from important meetings. The anonymous email had come from a burner account, untraceable, but I knew who'd sent it. Cameron had computer skills. He was president of his school's coding club, captain of the cybersecurity competition team. Creating an untraceable email would be child's play for him. The attacks escalated. Someone slashed Lisa's tires while her car was parked at the hospital where she worked. Security footage showed a figure in a hoodie approaching her car at 11:45 p.m., kneeling by each tire in turn, then walking away calmly. The footage was grainy, the figure's face hidden, but the height and build matched Cameron's. Cost to replace all 4 tires, $820. Our insurance covered most of it, but we had to pay a $500 deductible. 2 weeks later, someone filed a false complaint with the state medical board, claiming Lisa had shown up to work intoxicated and endangered patients. Lisa had to go through a formal review process, submit to random drug testing, have her license temporarily suspended pending investigation. She was eventually cleared completely, her record spotless, but the investigation took 6 weeks and caused her enormous stress. She started having panic attacks, couldn't sleep, lost 12 pounds from the anxiety. I watched my wife, the strongest person I know, crumble under the weight of these false accusations. I hired a private investigator, a former police detective named Marcus Thorne with 18 years of experience and a reputation for thoroughness. I paid him $3,000 upfront to track Cameron, document his movements, find proof of his involvement in the harassment. Thorne spent 3 weeks following Cameron, photographing him, tracking his digital footprint. His report showed a pattern of suspicious behavior. Cameron had created multiple fake social media accounts using variations of common names and stock photos. From these accounts, he'd posted negative reviews of Lisa's hospital, sent threatening messages to several of our mutual friends, spread rumors about our marriage being in trouble. Thorne traced the IP addresses of these accounts back to Cameron's home Wi-Fi network and to the public library Cameron frequently studied at. The evidence was solid but still not quite enough for criminal charges. Harassment laws are tricky. You need to prove sustained behavior with intent to cause emotional distress, and Cameron had been careful to never directly threaten us or make explicit admissions of guilt. I confronted Keith with all the evidence, the security footage, Dr. Greenwood's forensic report, the private investigator's findings, everything. We met at a coffee shop near his office. I laid out the folder of documentation on the table between us. Keith looked through it all, his face getting paler with each page. When he finished, he sat back and closed his eyes. Jesus Christ. Cameron? His voice was barely a whisper. I nodded. Your son destroyed our wedding album, slashed Lisa's tires, filed false complaints that could have destroyed her medical license, tried to get me fired with fake harassment allegations. He's been systematically trying to ruin our lives for months. Keith was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that made my hands clench into fists. You have to understand, Ryan. Cameron's under a lot of pressure. The college applications, maintaining his GPA, being valedictorian. He's not handling stress well. He probably acted out because he was feeling overwhelmed and needed attention. I stared at my brother in disbelief. Feeling overwhelmed? Keith, he committed multiple crimes. Vandalism, harassment, filing false reports. These aren't the actions of a stressed teenager. This is calculated, sustained, malicious behavior. Keith got defensive. He's 17 years old. He's still a kid. You want to ruin his future over some teenage mistakes? He's got a full scholarship to Stanford, 4 years of his life planned out, a career ahead of him, and you want to throw all that away because of what Some damaged photos? Photos that can be reprinted? I felt rage building in my chest like a physical pressure. Those photos included the last pictures of Lisa's grandmother. They were irreplaceable memories that your son destroyed out of jealousy and spite, and he didn't stop there. He tried to destroy Lisa's career, my job, our reputations. This isn't teenage acting out. This is sociopathic behavior. Keith stood up, gathering the papers. I'll talk to Cameron. I'll handle this as a family matter. But I'm asking you, as my brother, don't involve the police any further. Don't press charges. Let me deal with my son. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to take all the evidence straight to the district attorney and push for prosecution. But Keith was my brother. We'd grown up together, shared everything, supported each other through divorces and career changes and every hardship life threw at us. Family meant something. So against every instinct screaming at me to go nuclear, I agreed to let Keith handle it. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. That was a mistake. Keith's idea of handling it was a stern talking to and grounding Cameron from video games for 2 weeks. 2 weeks for months of calculated harassment and destruction. Cameron apparently apologized, promised it would never happen again, claimed he'd been going through a rough time and took it out on the wrong people. Keith seemed satisfied with this resolution. Jennifer, Cameron's stepmother, seemed less convinced, but stayed quiet. I waited to see if Cameron's behavior would change. It didn't. 3 days after his supposed apology, I got an email at work from someone claiming to be a former colleague, warning my current employer that I'd been fired from a previous job for embezzlement. Completely false, easily disproven, but my boss had to investigate. I had to provide documentation of my entire employment history, tax records, bank statements, everything to prove I wasn't a criminal. Another week of my life consumed by defending myself against lies. Lisa finally broke down after the embezzlement accusation. I came home to find her sitting on our bathroom floor, crying so hard she couldn't catch her breath. I can't do this anymore, she sobbed. I can't live like this, constantly waiting for the next attack, the next lie, the next attempt to destroy everything we've built. He's going to keep coming after us until we have nothing left. I held her while she cried, and I made a decision. Keith's way hadn't worked. Family loyalty hadn't worked. Trying to handle this privately had just given Cameron more opportunities to attack us. It was time to stop playing defense and go on the offensive. If Keith wouldn't hold his son accountable, I would. And I'd make sure the consequences were severe enough that Cameron would think twice before ever targeting anyone else again. I started planning. Cameron's graduation was 4 months away. He'd be giving the valedictorian speech in front of 500 students, their families, the entire faculty. It would be the proudest moment of his young life, the culmination of years of academic achievement. I was going to turn it into his worst nightmare. I went back to Dr. Greenwood and asked her to write a formal forensic report suitable for legal proceedings, including all her findings about the damaged wedding album. She produced a 15-page document with detailed photographs, analysis of the scratch patterns, fiber evidence, methodology, and conclusions. It read like something from a criminal trial. Next, I contacted a lawyer specializing in civil harassment and defamation, attorney Neil Zimmerman, who'd been practicing for 21 years and had won significant settlements in cyberbullying and harassment cases. I showed him everything: the damaged album, the forensic reports, the security footage, the private investigator's documentation of Cameron's fake social media accounts, records of all the false complaints filed against me and Lisa, the financial costs we'd incurred defending ourselves. Zimmerman studied it all carefully. This is comprehensive. You have an extremely strong case for a civil suit: intentional infliction of emotional distress, harassment, defamation, destruction of property. We could seek substantial damages. I asked him about criminal charges. He connected me with a prosecutor in the county district attorney's office, Assistant DA Rachel Levine, 12 years in the prosecutor's office with a focus on juvenile crimes. Rachel Levine reviewed the evidence over the course of 2 weeks. She brought in Officer Huang, who'd filed the original police report about the damaged wedding album. Together, they built a case file. Levine called me in for a meeting at her office. She was in her late 30s, professional and direct. Mr. Donovan, I've reviewed everything you've provided. Normally, we'd be looking at juvenile charges given Cameron's age, but the sustained nature of this harassment, the sophistication involved in creating fake accounts and filing false reports, the clear intent to cause harm, all of this points to someone who knows exactly what they're doing and doesn't care about the consequences. I'm recommending we charge him as an adult for several counts: criminal mischief for the property damage, identity theft for the fake social media accounts, filing false reports, and harassment. Adult charges meant adult consequences, a criminal record that wouldn't be sealed, potential jail time, though unlikely for a first offender, mandatory restitution, and most importantly for my purposes, public exposure of exactly what kind of person Cameron really was. I asked Rachel about timing. When would charges be filed? When would Cameron be arrested? She explained the process: filing charges, issuing a summons, arraignment, court dates. It would take weeks to work through the system. But then she mentioned something interesting. In cases involving juveniles, even when we charge them as adults, we sometimes coordinate with their schools. If there's an ongoing safety concern, if other students might be at risk, we notify the administration. Has Cameron exhibited any concerning behavior at school? I told her about Cameron's history, the rumors he'd spread about classmates, the manipulative behavior, the entitled attitude. Nothing that's resulted in formal discipline, I admitted, but a pattern of troubling behavior that indicates someone who enjoys hurting others. Rachel made a note. I'll reach out to the school. They should be aware that we're investigating one of their students for serious criminal behavior. That's when the idea fully formed. If Rachel contacted the school, if the administration knew about the criminal investigation, they'd have to act. And Cameron's graduation was coming up fast. I made an appointment to meet with Principal Donald Reichert. I brought every piece of evidence, organized in a thick binder with tabs and documentation. The forensic reports, the security footage, the private investigators' findings, the fake social media accounts Cameron had created, records of the false complaints, everything. I also brought letters from Lisa's hospital administration confirming she'd been investigated based on a false report, from my company's HR department confirming the fake harassment allegations, from the state medical board confirming the baseless complaint against Lisa's license. These weren't just my allegations anymore. These were documented instances of Cameron causing real, measurable harm to real institutions and real people. Principal Reichert spent over an hour reviewing everything. He was in his early 50s, had been an educator for 28 years, principal of Riverside High for the last 9. He'd seen plenty of troubled students, but this clearly shocked him. Mr. Donovan, this is extensive and deeply concerning. You're saying Cameron Marshall, our valedictorian, did all of this? I nodded. There's more. The district attorney's office is preparing to file criminal charges. He's being charged as an adult. Reichert sat back in his chair, processing. When? He asked. I told him Rachel Levine's timeline. Charges would be filed within 2 weeks. That's before graduation, Reichert said quietly. I nodded again. I'm here because I think you need to know what kind of person you're about to put on that stage to represent your school. Cameron isn't the brilliant, accomplished student he appears to be. He's a criminal who's been systematically harassing and attacking people he perceives as threats to his status. My wife and I aren't his only victims. Your private investigator found evidence he's been cyberbullying several students at this school, spreading rumors, creating fake accounts to damage their reputations. I pulled out additional documentation Thorne had uncovered. Screenshots of online harassment targeting 3 different Riverside High students, all posted from accounts traced back to Cameron's IP address. Cruel, vicious attacks on these kids' appearances, intelligence, families. One student had been so affected by the cyberbullying she'd transferred schools. Reichert's hands were shaking as he read through it. Why didn't any of these students report this? That was the question, wasn't it? Why do victims of bullying stay silent? Fear of not being believed, fear of retaliation, fear of being seen as weak. Cameron had carefully cultivated his image as the perfect student, the academic star, the kid destined for greatness. Who would believe that golden boy was capable of such cruelty? I explained all this to Reichert. He's been careful. He's smart enough to cover his tracks, to make his attacks look like they're coming from anonymous sources. But the evidence is there if you look for it. And now that I've looked, now that I've documented everything, you can't unknow it. You can't put this kid on that stage and pretend he represents the values of your school. Reichert was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, What do you want me to do? I'd thought carefully about this. I didn't just want Cameron to lose his valedictorian speech. That was too small, too private. I wanted public exposure. I wanted everyone who'd ever looked up to Cameron to see exactly who he really was. I wanted consequences that matched the harm he'd caused. I want you to revoke his valedictorian status. I want his scholarship to Stanford reviewed with full disclosure of his criminal charges. And I want it done at graduation, in front of everyone. Reichert's eyes widened. You want me to humiliate a 17-year-old boy in front of his entire graduating class and their families? I met his gaze steadily. I want you to hold a criminal accountable in the same public way he attacked his victims. He destroyed my wedding memories in private and attacked my wife's career in public. He spread lies and rumors to destroy reputations. He did all of this counting on privacy, counting on no one connecting the dots, counting on his victims being too afraid or too isolated to fight back. I'm giving you the chance to show your student body that actions have consequences, that being smart and accomplished doesn't protect you from accountability when you hurt people. Reichert looked at the evidence again. I need to consult with the school board, with our legal counsel. This is unprecedented. I gave him a week. If you don't handle this, I told him, the district attorney will. Rachel Levine is filing charges regardless. This will become public knowledge. The only question is whether your school gets ahead of it or gets dragged into it. The week that followed was the longest of my life. I heard nothing from Reichert. Rachel Levine called to confirm the charges were being filed on a Friday, 5 days before graduation. The school board had an emergency meeting on a Thursday night. I wasn't invited, but Keith called me afterwards, furious. What the hell did you do? The school board is talking about stripping Cameron of his valedictorian status. His graduation is in 4 days. I felt a grim satisfaction. I gave them evidence of his criminal behavior. What they do with it is up to them. Keith's voice was shaking with rage. He's 17. You're going to ruin his entire future over this? Stanford could rescind his scholarship. He could lose everything. I thought about Lisa on the bathroom floor, crying because she couldn't take the constant attacks anymore. Thought about Grandma Ruth's destroyed photos. Thought about the 3 students who'd transferred schools because of Cameron's cyberbullying. He ruined it himself, I said. I just made sure people knew about it. Keith threatened to sue me, threatened to press charges for harassment, for defamation, for anything his lawyer could come up with. I told him to go ahead, that I had more than enough evidence to defend myself and counter-sue for the damages Cameron had caused. We hung up on bad terms. Jennifer called me an hour later, crying. Ryan, please. I know what Cameron did was wrong. I know he needs consequences. But this is so public, so devastating. Is there any way to handle this more privately? Keith is talking about a payment plan for all the damages, restitution, therapy for Cameron, whatever you need. Please just don't do this at graduation. I felt a moment of sympathy for Jennifer. She'd tried to be a good stepmother to a deeply troubled kid, and this wasn't her fault. But then I remembered that she'd stayed quiet for months while Cameron attacked us. She'd known something was wrong and hadn't pushed Keith to address it seriously. The time for private resolution was 6 months ago, I told her. Cameron chose to make this public when he filed false reports with Lisa's medical board and my employer. Now he lives with the public consequences. Graduation day arrived. Lisa and I got dressed in silence. She was wearing a navy blue dress. I was in a suit. We looked like we were going to a funeral. In a way, we were. The funeral of my relationship with my brother, the funeral of Cameron's untouchable golden boy image, possibly the funeral of his Stanford scholarship and carefully planned future. We drove to Riverside High School and parked near the football field. The ceremony was set to start at 10 a.m. At 9:15, I walked into Principal Reichert's office for the meeting that would determine how this all played out. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. Mr. Donovan, I need to confirm one more time. You're absolutely certain about proceeding? I handed him the envelope I'd been carrying, the one containing final documentation from Rachel Levine's office. Official notice that criminal charges had been filed against Cameron Marshall. 4 counts, criminal mischief, identity theft, filing false reports, and harassment. Charged as an adult. Trial date set for 8 weeks out. I'm certain, I said. Reichert opened the envelope, reviewed the documents, and nodded slowly. The school board voted to revoke Cameron's valedictorian status based on the pending criminal charges and the evidence you provided regarding his conduct. His diploma will still be awarded, but he will not be giving the valedictorian speech. We've selected the salutatorian, Ashley Kim, to speak instead. I felt a surge of vindication. And Stanford? Reichert sighed. We're required to report significant disciplinary actions and criminal charges to universities where students have been accepted. I sent the formal notification to Stanford's admissions office yesterday. What they do with that information is up to them, but given the nature of the charges and the evidence, I'd be surprised if they don't rescind the scholarship offer. Everything I'd worked for, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every meeting with lawyers and prosecutors and investigators, it was coming together. Cameron's perfect facade was crumbling. When does he find out? I asked. Reichert glanced at his watch. In about 30 minutes. I've asked him and his parents to meet me here at 9:45 before the ceremony. I asked if I could stay. Reichert hesitated. It's highly irregular. I pulled out my phone and showed him a recent text message from Cameron, sent just 2 days ago from yet another burner number. It said simply, "Enjoy your pathetic life. You'll never prove anything." I traced the number back to a prepaid phone purchased at a store near Cameron's school. He's still harassing me, I said. Even knowing an investigation is ongoing. Even after being confronted by his father, he doesn't think there will be consequences. I want to see his face when he realizes he's wrong. Reichert looked at the text, then at me. Something shifted in his expression. You can wait in the outer office, but you stay quiet. This is between me and the family. I agreed. I sat in a chair against the wall where I could see into Reichert's office through the partially open door. At 9:43, Keith arrived with Jennifer and Cameron. Cameron was wearing his graduation gown over a button-down shirt and khakis. His valedictorian stole hung around his neck, gold cords marking him as the top student in his class. He looked confident, maybe a little confused about why he'd been called in before the ceremony, but not worried. They sat down in Reichert's office. I could hear everything. Reichert started formally. Cameron, Mr. and Mrs. Marshall, I've called you in to inform you of a decision made by the school board last night. In light of recent criminal charges filed against Cameron and evidence of conduct violations, the board has voted to revoke his valedictorian status effective immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Keith's voice, tight with barely controlled anger. What are you talking about? What criminal charges? Reichert slid documents across his desk. Your son has been charged with 4 criminal counts related to harassment, identity theft, and filing false reports. The charges were filed Friday by the county district attorney's office. Additionally, we've received extensive documentation of cyberbullying and harassment of other students at this school. The board determined that Cameron's conduct is incompatible with the honor of serving as valedictorian. I heard Cameron's voice for the first time, and it sent chills down my spine. He wasn't panicking. He was angry. This is bullshit. Who filed these charges? Let me guess. My Uncle Ryan? He's been trying to get back at me for months. Reichert's response was measured. The charges were filed by the district attorney based on substantial evidence collected over several months. Your uncle provided that evidence, yes, but it's been reviewed and verified by law enforcement, forensic experts, and our own investigation. The evidence is quite damning, Cameron. Keith was talking over Cameron now, demanding to see the evidence, threatening lawsuits, insisting this was a misunderstanding. Reichert remained calm. Mr. Marshall, this is not a negotiation. The decision has been made. Cameron will not be giving the valedictorian speech. His diploma will still be awarded, but without honors. Furthermore, Stanford University has been notified of the charges and the disciplinary action. They will make their own determination regarding his scholarship. That's when Cameron lost it. I heard a crash, like a chair being knocked over. You can't do this. I earned valedictorian. I have a 4.0 GPA, perfect SAT scores. I've worked for this my entire life. Reichert's voice stayed level. You also harassed multiple people, destroyed property, filed false reports with state agencies, and created fake online identities to cyberbully your classmates. Those actions have consequences. Jennifer was crying. Keith was still arguing, but his voice had lost its conviction. The evidence was too extensive, too well documented. There was no talking their way out of this. Cameron suddenly changed tactics, his voice shifting to something that might have been remorse if I didn't know him better. I made mistakes. I was under a lot of pressure. I'll apologize. I'll do community service, whatever you want. But please don't take this away from me. Please. It was manipulation, pure and calculated, trying to find the right words to make the consequences go away like they always had before. But Reichert wasn't falling for it. Cameron, you had opportunities to change your behavior. Your father spoke with you months ago. You were confronted with evidence of your actions. Instead of stopping, you escalated. You sent a threatening text to your uncle just 2 days ago. This isn't about one mistake. This is about a pattern of harmful behavior that you've shown no genuine remorse for. The meeting ended shortly after. Keith and Jennifer left, looking shell-shocked. Cameron walked past me in the outer office, and for a split second our eyes met. I saw rage there, pure and undisguised, but underneath it was something else. Fear. For the first time in his life, Cameron was facing consequences he couldn't manipulate or lie his way out of. The graduation ceremony started at 10 a.m. Lisa and I sat near the back, anonymous in the crowd of families. Ashley Kim gave a beautiful valedictorian speech about resilience and authenticity. Cameron sat in the third row with his graduating class, staring straight ahead, his face a blank mask. When his name was called to receive his diploma, there was polite applause, but nothing like the celebration that would have accompanied his valedictorian speech. He walked across the stage, shook Reichert's hand, received his diploma, and walked off. No honors stole, no special recognition. Just another graduate in a sea of 496 students. After the ceremony, families gathered on the football field for photos and celebrations. Lisa and I watched from a distance as Keith and Jennifer tried to smile for pictures with Cameron. Other families kept their distance. Word had clearly spread about the revoked valedictorian status, even if they didn't know all the details yet. Cameron stood rigid and furious, the center of attention in all the wrong ways. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Levine. Stanford rescinded scholarship offer 1 hour ago. Admission revoked due to criminal charges and violation of academic integrity policies. I showed the text to Lisa. She nodded slowly. Is it enough? She asked. Is it justice? I thought about that. Cameron's future wasn't destroyed, not completely. He could still go to college somewhere, though not Stanford. He'd still graduate high school, though without honors. He'd face criminal trial and likely get probation and community service as a first-time offender, maybe some therapy mandated by the court. His record would follow him, make some things harder, but he was smart and resourceful. He'd find a way forward. But his reputation was destroyed. Everyone who'd looked up to him now knew the truth. The perfect golden boy was a fraud, a bully, a criminal, and that knowledge would follow him wherever he went. It's enough, I said. We left before the crowd dispersed, drove home in silence. That evening, I got a voicemail from Keith. His voice was hollow, defeated. I hope you're happy, Ryan. You got what you wanted. My son's future is destroyed. Our family is destroyed. Was it worth it? I didn't call him back. Instead, I sat down with Lisa, and we looked through the new wedding album Andrea had created for us, reprinted from the digital files. All 300 photos, pristine and perfect. Grandma Ruth's face smiling in dozens of pictures, the last visual record of her we'd ever have, rescued and restored. Lisa cried happy tears this time. We got them back, she whispered. We'd gotten more than that back. We'd gotten justice. We'd gotten accountability. We'd proven that golden boys aren't untouchable, that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting abuse, that actions have consequences no matter how smart or accomplished you are. 3 weeks later, I received formal notice that Cameron had accepted a plea deal. He'd pleaded guilty to 2 counts of harassment and criminal mischief in exchange for dropping the more serious charges. His sentence, 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and restitution of $8,300 to cover all the damages and costs Lisa and I had incurred. The plea deal also included a formal restraining order. Cameron wasn't allowed within 500 feet of us. Any contact, direct or indirect, would violate his probation and result in immediate jail time. Keith and I haven't spoken since graduation day. I heard through family that he and Jennifer are in marriage counseling, the stress of Cameron's situation putting enormous strain on their relationship. Cameron ended up attending a state school, a decent university, but nothing like Stanford. His criminal record follows him. Every job application, every background check, every future opportunity will involve explaining what he did. I don't feel guilty about that. I feel satisfied. Justice isn't always about prison time or financial compensation. Sometimes justice is about exposure, about making sure everyone sees the truth, about taking away the mask that allows predators to operate in plain sight. Cameron thought he was untouchable. He thought his intelligence and achievements made him special, above consequences. I proved him wrong in the most public way possible. He destroyed my wedding memories. I destroyed his graduation. Seems fair to me. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.